Global Impact. Global Wisdom Missions is an organization of Christian ministers from different denominations and countries dedicated to presenting Jesus personally to this generation of the young minister and leader by assisting them to fulfill their calling by following and applying the wisdom of God. Our vision is to be a global conference that raises a generation of gospel-centered, gospel-driven, and gospel-focused ministers of Christ, who shall proclaim the gospel with integrity, purity, simplicity, and without adulteration. We are achieving our vision through educating ministers and leaders through our weekly broadcast of the Wisdom Conference on Facebook and YouTube Live, which is making a global impact. Wisdom Impact Magazine, our quarterly educational, inspirational and informational magazine, which will be printed in hard copies and be distributed globally free of charge to countries and territories which may not have access to internet. The Global Wisdom Academy, an online ministerial and leadership training academy which remains steadfast and committed to carrying out God's purpose of empowering Christian ministers and leaders globally to effectively execute leadership and ministry work with wisdom. Global Wisdom Mission's aim is to proclaim the gospel in word and deed, describing the shape of Jesus' own ministry. The Apostle Peter says he went around doing good and healing all. Through missions, we seek to provide healthcare for a lasting change during our actual Global Wisdom Conferences in different countries with our skilled medical physicians, experienced surgeons, and professional health workers. Partner with us now and help us spread the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world and take it to places where you may not be able to go yourself. Together, we can make a difference in somebody's life today. To give your donation, visit our website at www.globalwisdommissions.com and donate via our PayPal link or register your interest at wisdomconference3@gmail.com.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, and maybe good morning, depending on where you are. And welcome again to Wisdom Conference. This week, we're going to have part 2 of what we dealt with last week, that is dealing with addiction. And last week, you had Lady Maud, who moderated, and today it's me, Professor Jonathan Laurier from Arkansas in the United States, moderating the session. And with me again is our panelists from last week, Dawn and Jim Van Zijs from the UK, who poured in a boatload of knowledge and nuggets of wisdom for us. And today we're going to continue talking about addiction. Maybe before we start, I'll have Dawn and Jim, if you want to just introduce yourself again, so that those who are seeing you for the first time will know kind of who you are.
So I'm some probably here. I am here. I've lived in England for 17, 18 years now. Sort of lost a bit of my Americanism, but pretty much not quite into either. We both come from addictive lives, addictive behaviors. Both have come out together through working, being a Christian, working through it. He has really changed where we are today. Is not where we used to be.
Hi everyone. So for me, I was played as a child growing up, suffered through a lot of trauma and abuse, and unfortunately, we drugs and continued way of life until I encountered then God interrupted me. Praise the Lord. He set me free completely. and amazing testimony that how God takes them to the wreck and from that place of destruction and the place where He wants, where we're supposed. And that was an amazing process to go. And so deliverance. Jim was really worked his process of freedom. So he teaches us and reaches us where we're at, helps us in a totally unique what's what worked for me.
No. I needed to go of my addiction. I would not have respected it. Beyond it, I would have gone right. I needed to feel the pain. His dog would get delivered straight away, and she did that, and she was okay with it. Kind of for both of us.
Okay, so thank you so much. So for those who are joining us, please indicate where you're joining us from so that we will acknowledge you. And as we go on, if you have questions, you can type them in, whether it's through Facebook or YouTube or on this platform. So let's kind of dive right back in. So last week, you talked about what addiction is. Can we recall what you said about, what is addiction? When we say someone is addicted to something or someone has an addiction, what is that?
Okay, well, it's a compulsion, an overwhelming that totally controls the way you behave. The desire to have a behavior that has extremely negative consequences that you avoid and even recognize doing. And so that pattern of behavior to just yourself and others around you.
It's a family.
It's your faith, your friends, in every way. So total destruction.
So that's a very concise and full definition of what addiction is. So what are the types of addiction that people can have? Is it just drugs, or they're
most common use drugs, alcohol, cigarettes. Those are things everybody knows. You can go to food. You can. We were talking about people have to do a number, so they have to test 4 times and they're gone. Then they order shoes nice and wear the shoes, and to when they get in the car, they put indicators on the start steering wheel. They touch over, and if they one time they didn't touch the door, everything plumbing again, and go through the whole just to make sure that they get it perfect. That's even an affliction. It's a mental health, but they are addicted out of it. I mean, it could be anything. Most common is going to be drugs, alcohol, cigarettes. But you can be addicted. Well, technically, you could be a dog.
Which is designed to be. Yeah, but they also our face brands and all those sorts of things. Is you can almost be addicted if you're not focused on the right where you're supposed to be. And if you get to that endorphins that from that overwhelming fix that you get, you can become addicted.
And more than oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The real driver behind addiction is the substance. It isn't the thing that you do. It's the why behind it. Why do you go for the why? Once you know that why, you will be able to start how to get rid of it.
So for example, if you take alcohol, there are so many people who drink alcohol, but not everybody is addicted to alcohol.
True.
So is there a certain type of person who is prone to addiction? There are people who will try drugs for the first time and say, ew, I don't like it. So why is it that some people get addicted? Can you predict kind of who is going to be or to have an addiction? Is it something that's predictable? Or is there a type of personality or a type of behavior that leads to addiction?
I'd say probably there's kind of big key that you would be an addicted person. Somebody who's driven in one way. I used to be alcoholic. I can still drink. According to AA, and I will go alcoholism, drink myself into being, and I'm never going to be alcohol again. But I figured out why I drank to cover the issues that I had. So it's more to be addicted or have some kind of an issue trying to cover, cope with. And addiction or whatever is a coping mechanism. Kind of like when you break your leg. So it's more like the leg before you work out the alcohol addiction.
I think as well that with mental health, you'll find that depression and as well. You'll find more to go away and addict because of the act they're dealing in the first place. They're trying to fix it. So and that comes with the dual diagnosis.
I've got to explain.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say it's which one comes to the egg. Okay. Did they drink? And that caused the PTSD, whatever they have first wanted to know. Didn't have to be. It's deciding which one. Some of them drink or like marijuana paranoia. So people want to get away from all the problem drinking, or they weed becomes and get less paranoid and anxious about them. So they use that to get themselves out, more paranoia. So it's kind of a vicious thing of it that way. And that's to do with diagnosed health issue, and you have the addiction.
So those people suffering with mental health issues inclined to then into an addictive. But it always comes as well, doesn't it? We're so unique. And even though you predict that those mental health issues are going to fall into that addiction, you've got 100 people down the ditch. 100 people, 50 of them will have an ankle, 50 do. Why did those 50 broken ankle? That we can't say. But because we are so unique.
I mean, there was one thing, and there was one guy who did really sales, but he took cocaine. So some of the other sales people, I want to be like him, cocaine, and then help him do the sales better, customers, and handle and all that. All they need to do is cocaine, and I'll be a better. Then they start taking much. They need more money. Your cocaine habit. Do you see what I mean? You can become a mental issue. Look at something. Well, he's doing it, and he hope maybe if I do that, I'll do it. And it can be as simple as that's how they can.
So one of the most addictive substances is tobacco, and yet it's not necessarily associated with some of the mental health issues that you discussed, kind of talking about the chicken and the egg phenomenon. And even though it's not associated with a mental health issue, I mean, like when I teach medical students, I tell them like tobacco is probably the worst thing man invented, because almost every disease category that you can think of, tobacco has something to do with it. And yet, it's not necessarily as, or people don't consider that when you talk about addiction. Can you speak to that? I mean, is that something that you deal with as well in your arena?
Yeah. I mean, we both suffered with smoking. I the dad won't see this. I started, and by the time really about 10, I probably got up to today. All done outside of school, outside of doing smoking quite a lot. And I smoked for 30 years. Okay. I had become habitually a smoker, where I get down to the number one, next one off for that one, and you on. And I learned the amount adapted to my body is couldn't even tell you how much it's done. I had to act OD on nicotine. Finally get to a point that I needed to quit. Okay, and that was really kind of for me was that I had to OD. And that was why I go through it. It was learned as a thing. It was a calming effect. Stripped out, cigarette. And it's breathing exercise. People fully understand. You understand in through the mouth, out, nose. Calming effect. Just what you get when you do the same thing. Same calming cigarette. It's breathing, getting oxygen in the brain. But the thing people don't realize is there's cigarettes doing it.
It's always been a stress relief. People say, I just want to feel calm again from cigarette.
And I'm going to go outside and air.
Yeah. It's as you say, it's horrible ones. It's been invented. But what do you do?
Yeah. And in a way, or American term, just normal, pearl and ignore brands. But basically, the cigarettes that already made have huge amounts put into the tobacco and pack everything together. There's a lot of things. Something through the filter. They sort of filter things really extra chemicals that come into you anyway. And there's a lot that goes into your body.
So Don and Jim, I think there's people are hearing the feedback, and so I think what we're going to do is we're going to go to a commercial break for a second. Okay. If you can log out and then log back in, hopefully that will be corrected.
Okay.
Wisdom Missions, a ministry with global impact. Global Wisdom Missions is an organization of Christian ministers from different denominations and countries dedicated to presenting Jesus personally to this generation of the young minister and leader by assisting them to fulfill their calling by following and applying the wisdom of God. Our vision is to be a global conference that raises a generation of gospel-centered, gospel-driven, and gospel-focused ministers of Christ, who shall proclaim the gospel with integrity, purity, simplicity, and without adulteration. We are achieving our vision through educating ministers and leaders through our weekly broadcast of the Wisdom Conference on Facebook and YouTube Live, which is making a global impact. Wisdom Impact Magazine, our quarterly educational, inspirational, and informational magazine, which will be printed in hard copies and be distributed globally free of charge to countries and territories which may not have access to internet. The Global Wisdom Academy, an online ministerial and leadership training academy which remains steadfast and committed to carrying out God's purpose of empowering Christian ministers and leaders globally to effectively execute leadership and ministry work with wisdom. Global Wisdom Missions' aim is to proclaim the gospel in word and deed, describing the shape of Jesus' own ministry. The Apostle Peter says he went around doing good and healing all. Through missions, we seek to provide health care for a lasting change during our actual Global Wisdom Conferences in different countries with our skilled medical physicians, experienced surgeons, and professional health workers. Partner with us now and help us spread the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world and take it to places where you may not be able to go yourself. Together, we can make a difference in somebody's life today. To give your donation, visit our website at www.globalwisdommissions.com and donate via our PayPal link or register your interest at wisdomconference3@gmail.com.
Okay, are we there?
Hello.
Go.
Okay.
We're still,
Are you still hearing the feedback?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's hope that it will get better with time. So when we first left off, we were talking about tobacco and how that is also an addiction, and you talked about your testimony. So the question is, so how common is addiction? And maybe that's such a broad topic, but at least you can tease it out based on the substance.
I think about one in four people will become addicted. And that's huge.
Yes. So when you say 1 in 4 people, that means across all the compartments of addiction, right?
I think
Okay.
the only one that you got if you like is heroin.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that seems to last resort.
When you're either going to OD or off.
There's sort of limited way back. Start using heroin.
So how about alcohol? I mean, is it also a quarter of people?
Pretty. Yeah, I mean, if you look at, some people say I drink once every day because I've had a hard day. Calm down. When it becomes addiction, the difference between dependent versus dependent, they cannot get around addiction. Whereas I'm addicted to I can get away. Okay, but there are some people with alcohol just really drink it, but I don't have an addiction. They just enjoy this. It depends on the level of how much you need, rather than how much you. Now, granted, there was saying that there was a quantity. If you bottle a day, you'd have a dependency. You have an addiction. If you can glass, you down for a month, not need to go back to it. You don't have an. Put it down. But your mind is going towards still, you know it's probably good, but you know what I'm saying? It's whether you have that to back to it. That's when you got an issue.
I think underneath that as well. Look, why have you got that?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there going back? One is it emotion, or is it is there addiction that where you've been hijacked? You're in that cycle of that dopamine, or is it pure emotional fit?
So, like, in when you go to medical school or nursing school, they teach you about kind of for alcohol, screening for alcohol abuse, and most of the time when you ask people about how much alcohol you drink, they always underestimate, how much they drink. And so, there's this questionnaire that we call the CAGE questionnaire, right? So we say, have you felt the need to cut back on your drinking? Or have you been annoyed by people criticizing your drinking, And then do you have guilty feelings about your drinking? And then do you sometimes have to like drink as an eye opener, like to, let's say, you wake up or you haven't drank in a while and you need a drink to get yourself together, So does that apply in the other areas like the hard drugs, cocaine, heroin, and stuff?
Yeah. I would just when you ask this question, do you feel you come back? The chances of them because they're in denial.
Yes.
So they're being of course not.
You're talking about one. And like you said, do you need drink? I have the shake, and they have their level. They have to have it in the morning. It's like an eye opener. Thinking alcohol is depressant, and using it as an eye opener. Kind of a
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it goes with any. I mean, I've had to have a cigarette in the morning. Wake up in the morning. Or sorry, it's English term. American term. I got to do a cigarette. They have to. You cannot go anywhere. Take a shower. They don't have to. They don't get this through. Cigarette first.
And then of course you coffee.
Yep. I can't stay without coffee.
Yeah. So last week you gave some statistics of addiction in the church and then also with within the clergy. Can you kind of go over that again?
Yeah. It's sort of alarming, but it's like a hidden addiction. That's one thing that you don't realize. But you think of it simply as like a third of the women. So 1 in 3 more likely to porn for one reason. But about anywhere 40 to 70% men looking at it. This is what they know. Remember, people come. So you do a study. You're like, no, I because women want to perceived in that sort of way. Use it much. Where clerk is pretty high. You would being the leaders of the most supported. But as anybody knows, not perfection. It's a hospital. And broken people we are. And 50%. But it doesn't mean that every church, every other pastor is doing porn. but it is a large quantity to do it, and it's more thing. I've heard say that you're a single guy. It's okay to have porn because you're not doing anything wrong. And if he's willing to say that, then where's he stand? As a simple way of putting it.
But it's a secret one, and seems to be the secret or that it's very silent. People can do it, and no one will know. So it's physically not obvious.
They want us to. They're saying that there's still.
They want us.
That's what I heard. And I did it isolate. So try it again.
I think. I mean, I can hear you for the most part. I'm not sure if the rest of the people can hear you. I mean, yeah, there are some breaks when you speak, but I mean, I can still follow the conversation. So I think we should continue until until we hear from Lady Maud if we need to stop again. So
cool.
So you talked about pornography. How about, like, maybe people might think, oh, in the church, you're not going to have people who are addicted to alcohol or cocaine or heroin. Do you have any statistics on those substances?
Within the church?
Yes, within the church and within, like, the clergy.
I think there was that one.
Yeah. The way to kind of somebody if you there's usually independent. There's a simple way of putting it. You look up and down you. Somebody got some kind of issue with alcohol. If you have multiple row, more than likely one person in within a couple rows, some kind of an addiction, drugs, some. Okay. Usually within a church, more street level, you have a much higher percentage rather than the high church, more established classes. They tend to not have much of an addiction problem. But alcohol is a huge problem no matter which place you go.
So I think we're going to play the jingle again, and then and then if you can see, I'm wondering if there's any other device around you that's listening.
One device on it. This one.
Okay. So we'll just kind of log off and log back in again whilst they play the jingle.
Okay. Cool.
Global Wisdom Missions, a ministry with global impact. Global Wisdom Missions is an organization of Christian ministers from different denominations and countries dedicated to presenting Jesus personally to this generation of the young minister and leader by assisting them to fulfill their calling by following and applying the wisdom of God. Our vision is to be a global conference that raises a generation of gospel-centered, gospel-driven, and gospel-focused ministers of Christ, who shall proclaim the gospel with integrity, purity, simplicity, and without adulteration. We are achieving our vision through educating ministers and leaders through our weekly broadcast of the Wisdom Conference on Facebook and YouTube Live, which is making a global impact. Wisdom Impact Magazine, our quarterly educational, inspirational, and informational magazine, which will be printed in hard copies and be distributed globally free of charge to countries and territories which may not have access to internet. The Global Wisdom Academy, an online ministerial and leadership training academy which remains steadfast and committed to carrying out God's purpose of empowering Christian ministers and leaders globally to effectively execute leadership and ministry work with wisdom. Global Wisdom Mission's aim is to proclaim the gospel in word and deed, describing the shape of Jesus' own ministry. The Apostle Peter says he went around doing good and healing all. Through missions, we seek to provide healthcare for a lasting change during our actual global wisdom conferences in different countries with our skilled medical physicians, experienced surgeons, and professional health workers. Partner with us now and help us spread the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world and take it to places where you may not be able to go yourself. Together, we can make a difference in somebody's life today. To give your donation, visit our website at www.globalwisdommissions.com and donate via our PayPal link or register your interest at wisdomconference3@gmail.com.
I'm not even in. Instead of taking it.
Hello. So we apologize for the technical difficulties, but we are back. So Don and Jim, can you unmute and speak? Let's see.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, sounding better.
We've still got the feedback.
Oh, you still got the feedback? But I'm hearing you better now than before. So, okay, so we'll power through it. Okay, so yes, we were talking about the different types of addiction in the church. So now let's kind of shift over to the effects of addiction. So we want to address it from different angles. So what are the physical effects? What are the mental effects, emotional effects, social effects, its effects on relationships, and spiritual effects of addiction? So that's like a mouthful, but if we can address some of the effects of addiction.
Okay. So I would say there's probably a very of self, and that means different for everybody. But it's about losing self within you. That becomes your identity, and your relations begin to suffer because they become so you can actually start destroying those addictions, destroying those relationships, and then you become isolated. And when you become isolated within yourself, you then want to use even more.
I was going to say use more because nobody else is around, so why not?
And it has such a devastating effect on if you're a parent, on the children as well. The children then become neglected because they aren't your priority. Your drug of choice becomes your priority, and it becomes above everything. And it becomes like your best friend.
Well, it becomes your only friend because realistically, there isn't anybody else around. And most of it starts with, it doesn't really affect anybody. I drink and it's only my body. I smoke, it's only my body. I do drugs, it's only my body. I do porn, it's only it's only my body. I'm not affecting anybody else. But people start to pick up on things that are a little bit wrong. And that's what's the problem, is your family will pick up on the change in you that you won't feel because you're in the change. You won't notice that there's anything different or anything wrong. They'll pick up on it. And sometimes they pull away from you because they don't like what you've done. You know, you become a bit more angry. You're a bit more isolated. You don't talk to me anymore. All you do is go outside and you drink, or you go outside and you do this or that. And that's kind of the problem, that your family picks up on it first. And when they start pulling away, that's when the addiction or your coping mechanism or whatever you're using becomes more important, because they feel they're not as important, like you said. You know, they don't feel that, wow, you know, I'm the center of their life. It's whatever it is that they're doing is the center of their life.
Yeah, it's an ongoing spiral of negativity. And we've seen quite a few families destroyed through the drug of their choice being the priority, with children being taken away because they've been neglected, and then just not in healthy environments. And it's so damaging. Such a shame to see that somebody can stay inside that addiction and watch everything be destroyed around them.
Yeah. And in a way, you were talking about spiritually, if I was a Christian man and I watched my whole life being destroyed around me, the question I'd be asking is, why is God letting this happen to me? Why is he doing that to me? Why do I have to endure this terrible thing? Why doesn't he just get me out of this? If it was that bad, God could just take care of it right then and there. And a lot of it is people's ideal of what they think God is, just sitting there with the magic all cure button, you know, and kind of going, all right, Jim's going to ask for it in a minute. And there you are. You're saved from your stupidity. And it's more about learning why you're being stupid and fixing your problem. Because part of what God does his bit, but you got to do your bit. It's not like Dawn, she got blessed. She got prayed for, and a lot of her addictions were instantly taken care of. Me, I'm the opposite. I needed the pain. I needed to suffer. I needed to feel it, because, being honest with you, it wasn't just for my suffering. It was for other people. That, you know what, I get prayer after prayer after prayer, and God just doesn't take it away from me. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I had to go through it. I had to go through the shakes. I had to go through the DTs. I had to go through the pain of it. You know what? You can too. And it was more them going, wow, okay, so you made it. And it's like, yeah, I made it. That's what they needed to see. And I think that's the thing with people with their spirituality. They're thinking that God's got an all save me button. But sometimes he does. But sometimes you got to save yourself, because it's not just for you. You're going to be an inspiration for somebody else down the line who's coming up behind you. Yeah.
So, sorry, go on, Jonathan.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So, so to piggyback on what you were saying, I mean, so why is it so difficult, you know, to overcome addiction? You know, you talked about some of the difficulties and whether God sometimes, you know, has a button or not. Why is it so difficult to overcome addiction?
Yeah, I've unmuted us. I would say a lot of what we do is the brain is smart. We learn, and we're a very learned species. So when we feel something, there's a thought that feeds into feelings that then cause an emotion. And eventually, once that pattern is established, the thought and the emotion, they get knocked out because the brain doesn't need to associate that. It's already associated. It goes straight to the feeling. And it takes milliseconds for the thought and the feeling to kick in to go straight to the emotion. And the emotion says, I need whatever. And when people are trying to go backward, they can get to the emotion, but they can't get to the feeling that fed it. And they surely can't get to the thought that fed that because those are milliseconds. You can't really retain that information or get that information. It takes work to go backward to do it. So what you've been doing for 10, 15, 20, 30 years is long practiced bad behaviors that then when you have to reverse it backwards, it's going to take you at least a few months to maybe a few years to kind of really unpack all that stuff. And when you unpack it, that's when you get yourself out of the addiction. Until you get unpacked, I can stop drinking, but I'll still have that thought. I'll still have that feeling. I'll still have the emotion. I'll still need to have a coping mechanism. So if it's not drink, it's going to be boxing. It's going to be food. It's going to be whatever you dream up. I'm going to replace it. And that's where we're talking about jumping addictions. You can go from one addiction to the next, to the next, to the next to try to get that coping mechanism. And, people have been like, I've been free from drink for 2 years. Great, but I'm on Coke. Right. So you're still not free, and in a way of looking at it, they're thinking, I've done brilliant because I've stopped the drink. Yeah, but you're still got the same issue. And that's why it's so tough is you got to get back to that issue. And it takes time and it's painful. It is really painful to go back to those issues because that's why you're coping with something else to cover up those issues that you struggle with to begin with.
Can I just say as well that I don't think that you can become addicted unless there's a root cause.
Yeah.
There has to be a root cause as to why you ventured that way to grab hold of that substance or behavior. And I don't think that you wouldn't entertain it if there wasn't a reason in a root cause in the first place. And that's where we like to look back to is what are those root causes.
So in that light, so what are the steps to getting free from addiction, right? Dawn, you mentioned earlier on that there are people who are addicted who kind of don't believe that they are addicted, right? They have a what's the term? That's denial. They are in denial, right? And so, what are the steps to getting free?
Okay, so I think the first step that you have to do is take responsibility. You have to own your own behavior. You have to recognize that actually, yes, I've got a problem.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of really key.
And until you actually acknowledge and come out of that denial that, yes, I have a problem and I can't control this anymore. It controls me. That is your very first step of going, okay, I need some help.
And in a way, you always hear the family members say, my husband, my sister, my cousin has a real bad drinking problem, or they really are using this drug or this thing too much, or they have an eating disorder. They're the size of a house and they don't recognize they got a problem. And we always ask the simple question is, do they see that it's a problem? And if they say no, they don't see it as a problem, it's not a problem.
The one thing we always ask people is, are you ready? Are you really ready to give it up? Because a lot of people, they want the help, and they say they're ready, but actually they're not. And that those as well is the step of saying and acknowledging, yes, I take responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, what I'm doing is wrong, and yes, it's destroying me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the very first step of somebody saying, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's about, what do you do about that? Okay, so you're asking for help. Well, where are they going to go?
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to do? And we find that here, if people want to go into a rehab, unless they're gone through the
detoxing,
the GP and the health service way, that for them to get into a rehab is very difficult, and it's very expensive.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, they have to go through this process with the health services, and it's a very long process.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them will just go back to their drug use or their addiction abuse again, because the process is so long. So it's like, well, what are they going to do? What's available then?
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people will run to the church even though they're not Christian.
If the church presents itself as a place you can run to and hide and, you know, get healed or whatever, that's really what the churches are there for, is greet the people who are literally going, you got to save me. Mm-hmm. And just, they might stink. And Dawn and I, we were around some people that really stunk badly, you know, but you got to get beyond that first step. If you can reach them that point, you know, and just love them for where they are, that's where the church can really step in, because the government and the state, they handle it clinically, they handle it methodically, and it takes time because there's so many people, you can't get them in. Somebody's got to step up. And if the church steps up and goes, you know what, come in here, we'll love you, we'll find you a place to get a shower, let's get the stink off of you, let's get you a good meal in you, let's show you what Jesus wanted you to be, and just give them that respect. Really, it's really what they're looking for. It's just respect and saying, you know what, you are broken, you do got a problem, but you know what, we may not have all the answers, but I'm going to stand with you.
I think, you know, obviously when they come out, when they first say, okay, I admit I've got a problem, they have to reach out. You have to run to something. If you're not going to run to your addiction, where are you going to run? So your choices are quite limited. You've got your own healthcare providers and your GP surgery, and they'll take you down that route. And, you know, and that's good. If you can get that support and you can get that direction with your healthcare provider, then great. But also,
I guess in a way, and also, I would say, you get that wisdom, but have someone there to help support you. Family, friends, you know what I mean? The church, the more people that are surrounding them, even though they got the GP help and all that, even if you get other people surrounding and helping you, that is so much better, because then those people can kind of keep you going on that right direction.
I think, I mean, we've tried to get people with mentors so that when they reach for help, they've got somebody solid that can stand with them.
And it's what you kind of got to consider is, if you're doing mentorship or what we call befriending, there's different levels of helping people. But if you're a mentor to somebody, you're not just out of addiction. You are out of addiction. You have conquered your addiction. Because if you're just out of it, it is so easy to slip back. And if you slip back, you take them with you. You know, and it really needs to be somebody solid in God that can go, you know what, I've been there, I've done that, I've seen it, I've got the t-shirt. It doesn't have to be the same, I'm alcoholic, so you're alcoholic, you know what I mean? It can be drugs, it can be, you know, thievery, it can be sex addiction, it can be food addiction. It doesn't matter what it is that you've gotten out of it. That's the important bit.
So sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. You want to keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Sorry.
Okay. So I think for what we've experienced is when people come to us. I had one chap come in the door, and we were running the program within the church, and he wasn't a Christian, but his family brought him to us because they'd heard that there was support within the church, and they didn't know what it was. And I remember him, and I was waiting for everyone to arrive, and I was at the bottom of these steps waiting for people to come in. And this family member just brought this chap in, this lad in, and he just fell on the steps, fell on the stairs, and they said, "Can you help him?" And
I think I know who you mean.
yeah,
I think I know.
And he just sat there crying.
He was drunk when
he was drunk.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it was like, of course we can help. You know, we're not going to turn you away. And it was just knowing that he had somewhere safe.
Yeah.
And it was creating that safe environment that even though he was in that chaos within his head and in his life, that somebody could come and just give him that security.
Everything's okay.
Of everything's going to be okay. You know, how we're going to do this, we don't know, because we don't know where you've been, where you're going. This is down to what God wants, you know, and we're going to support you to come through this. And he was able to. We got him through. He got clean and sober. Lovely guy, guy. He went on to work, and you know, was able to hold down his full-time job, and you know, it was just one of the many lovely stories that you know, God we've witnessed God doing. And again, I think it's like, if people understand and they know that there is something in the local church, then even though you're not Christian, you can run to it.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the AAs, the AA 12-step program.
Yep. I mean, they are good, valid programs. Don't get me wrong. Okay. AAs are good programs, and people get clean on those programs. What helps is when you have a program that puts God into the middle of it. There is so much more that you can get out rather than just abstinence. And it's what we call dry drunks. I can stop drinking and be an alcoholic, and I can stop drinking, and I can walk an extra long block to dodge the pub so I don't go by the pub, and I can make sure that I never get around alcohol. Yes, you have stopped drinking, but you are still a dry drunk. And those are the people that the AA guys talk about. If you drink a little bit, you're going to go the rest of the way. And it's because they haven't solved the issue. You know?
So talking about the church, right? It's great that the church is a resource. However, there are some churches where the pastor will have, or the leadership, they have zero experience with dealing with people with addiction, and they really have no way of knowing how to help. Let's say you gave the example of, you know, people coming in stinking, get drunk, and they need help. I mean, they've realized they need help, so either they come in themselves or somebody just drops them, you know, at the doorstep. So what would you advise kind of church leadership and pastors, that first of all, what do they need to know, and how do they position themselves to become that sanctuary that these folk can come in and be helped?
Okay. I would say first positioning is know your neighborhood. If you have prostitutes, if you have homelessness, if you have people sleeping rough, if you have people that drink, if you're in a lower income area, you are more likely to have them come in your doors. So it's more about knowing the neighborhood that you're in. If that's your church, first thing they got to do is you got to have people that understand risk of sex offenders, risk of alcoholics, and be able to recognize it. Go through training. One of the trainings that Dawn and I do is Barnabas training. It teaches churches and organizations how to come alongside people. It also teaches like personalities to understand that, like, for a man to walk into a area with prostitutes is completely different from a woman walking into the same area. The impact a woman would have is much greater than the man, because they're used to the men walking in, doing their business, walking out. Do you see what I mean? So to learn how to be a man walking in, first thing you would know is whenever we work with prostitutes, Dawn is with me. End of. I do not go alone. Too likely that somebody would look at me, seeing that I'm in the prostitute area, going, he's a Christian and he's hanging out with the prostitutes. Got my wife there, totally different story. Okay. But it's more learning how to do things safely. And then, more than anything, the Bible is a brilliant, because Jesus spoke to prostitutes. He spoke to thieves. He spoke to tax collectors. He spoke to the worst of the worst. He didn't go, let me protect myself quick. Let me get whatever. He went and he spoke to them. Granted, in our society, we kind of got to put in a bit of safeguarding. But if you get the training, then doing it is better. And if you have missions, if your neighborhood, like I said, if you don't have a neighborhood that's kind of marginalized and you have higher functioning people, you need to kind of change the way you look at things, because higher functioning people are going to be doing the higher end drugs. They're going to be drinking, but they're going to be drinking in silence. You will see people that drink a lot have a red nose. In the summertime, wintertime, yeah, it's cold. Understand that. But if they have a red nose or red cheeks and all that, and it's not makeup, more than likely they drink to an excessive amount. It's a visual sign that you can see it. They might be high functioning, but you can recognize it and go, aha, you're a drinker because you got the big red nose.
That's one of the symptoms.
I mean, it's simple ways, simple things that you can look at. Bloodshot eyes, rashes on the face.
But it's about training your people up to know these things, and a willingness and a heart for these people.
Yeah.
And that's one thing we came across, and we found that people on the outside look at people that are struggling with addictions, and they say, oh yes, we'd like to help, but actually there's no heart for that ministry.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes a nice thing to do, is to help the homeless or to help those that struggle, but actually they aren't willing to get down and dirty with them because they're scared. A lot of people don't understand what's happening. And if they learned behind it what's happening to these people, they would be less fearful of sitting with them and coming alongside these people. So it's about education, educating the church, that actually they're
just people.
They're just as equal as what you are.
I mean,
but they just got a different issue.
Yeah. I remember one time, I'll give a quick story, real fast one. I was sitting down, homeless people would tend to sit on the floor, on the pavement. They sit on the ground. And when you approach somebody, you don't stand in front of them and tower over them. You always come down to their level. So I was sitting on the pavement with him, just having a natter. It just came to a point where we were talking about whatever was going on with his life. And a guy came by and he put money down with sorry, I almost used his name. But he put money down for him, and then he put money down for me. and I said, oh, thank you very much. And, God bless you. And then he went, and literally I just picked up the money, gave it to the guy that I was with and said, here you go. You got double bubble. There you are. But in a way of looking at it, it was nice to know that another person saw me just as homeless as the homeless guy. And at that point, he saw how equal we were, that he went, there's two homeless people. One probably looks a bit dirtier than the other, but you know what? Hey, doesn't matter. He still saw me as a homeless guy. And in a way, that's the level you need to achieve, is that they feel that you are just so equal with them, that that's who you are.
I think, you know, God made us all equal, and sometimes we are naturally equipped to come along in this ministry, and others aren't, and others are called to do other things. But it's a very small minority within the church that actually feel and have the heart to come alongside these guys that are suffering with addiction. And it's pinpointing those people quickly in your church and then equipping them and get a lot of a prayer support ministry around them as well.
Every time that they go out, get somebody on their knees praying in a corner, however you get those people, that covering is essential. You know, and you just get out, and all they're doing is just saying, look, just protect them and find the right way that we'll be able to meet somebody, or that we'll actually meet someone. You know, that is so key.
Yeah, and that, as I say, it's about finding people with that heart for that ministry. And then once you find that, then you start equipping.
But the other thing that leadership has to remember is addiction is non-successful. You will not get a 90% recovery rate. You will not get everybody. You're doing brilliant when you get 10%. And that's the thing you got to remember. It's not that you're going to get mass amounts that are going to be fixed, because so many people aren't ready. It's more being realistic and going, you know what? We got 1 in 10, but we got 1. And it's more about the 1. It's like the 99 sheep and the 1. Jesus he loved the 99. He left them. They were fine. They were doing what they were doing. They were sheep. They were eating. The one that got lost, he had to go get that one. It's more about finding that one. Pull that one out. That's going to affect them.
So, you know, you talked a lot about education and finding people with a heart for this ministry. And obviously, you know, some people don't even know that they have a heart for this because they've not been exposed to it, right? So in the UK, and I'll come to those who are outside the UK. I mean, at least you are based in the UK, and so there are churches that may have access to you to do the Barnabas training. Now, so how about somebody in Uganda or somebody in Kenya who does not have access to these things? Do you have this training online that people can at least subscribe to, so that they can get some knowledge and education so they can impact the world around them?
Yes, we do. We've been training people up in Nigeria and in Ghana, and they've taken it round to their churches and also into their schools, which was really good to educate.
Kind of prevent it. Basically, the school teachers were doing it as preventative. Get them early before they become addicts. Get them and go, whoa, you know.
So so we're able to train people through Zoom, and it doesn't matter where you're coming from. We can meet you where we're at, and we have info on our website, so we can do training for Barnabas and Elijah Project, and also we have a thing called MAC training, which also helps go into the schools. And it's about educating people to meet them where they're at really quickly. So the device that they use within the schools and within the programs to help people start identifying who they are and where they're at. And it's a great tool to just use for those that are supporting. So all the courses and that are online, and we can engage with those that want that. And we can talk them through how that would happen and what we can provide.
Can you tell us your website so people will know?
So it's recovered. So RECOVERED, the number 4, and then life, LIFE, and then .org. Yep, you were still mute. So whatever you said something.
Yes, so recoveredforlife.org. and the 4 is the number 4. Yeah. And so, you know, for those who are watching, if you need education, and you need to learn about how to minister to folk with addictions, then that's one of the options that you can, you know, one resource that you can go to. And I believe that will be helpful to you. Now, whilst we're on this, you mentioned the Elijah Project. Can you talk briefly about what that is?
Yeah. It was a program that God gave me. I was used to run one of the 12-step programs. And I ran that for about 7 years within the church. And then I just really struggled to continue running that. I just didn't feel that it was right that I kept delivering this program. And God,
it was because God wasn't in it, not just the fellowships. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with the fellowships. So, but yeah, sorry.
So God just started to give me this download of information, and I didn't know what it was about, so I just started writing it. And and I just kept getting these downloads from him of all these different subjects and things. So I started writing, and then Jim realized what it was about, and he put it actually into a format. And
there was one sheet of paper, and to give you a perspective of how the download works, she had one sheet of paper. She ran out of space and just kept going around the sheet of paper. Wherever there was a gap, there was just this. And the funny thing is, I think there was like 2 periods in the whole page. And so the whole thing was just one whole sentence that just kept going until it became so I had to kind of make sense out of that and put it into a book. You know?
So, but anyway, so yeah, it sort of broke down, the program sort of broke down into 3 stages, if you like. And the first stage is allowing people to recognize where they are with God. What is their relationship with God? What does that look like? And are they able to actually have relationship rather than a religious experience with God? We also deal with that with them to be able to get baptized as well. A lot of people sit in the churches and have never been baptized,
or never had Holy Spirit infilling. That's another portion. So there's kind of stages where salvation and baptism, Holy Spirit infilling. There's deliverance that's in there. You know, I mean, there's quite a lot. It's the whole process is, if you think of like an alpha course, it's like the what's after alpha. So you get them hooked on alpha and go, come on into the church. And then it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And it's
also a process for them to get real. They're getting real and taking responsibility. And it's allowing them to actually own their own person and their own actions. And understanding who they are, but who they are in Christ. And what Christ has done for them. So it's that foundational course to start with. And then they go into stage 2. So there's 4 sessions in stage 1, 4 sessions in stage 2, and it's about getting real. So if they're going to get real, we've got to look at stuff. They can't keep running from it anymore. So we support them in getting real with their emotions, with their thoughts, their behaviors. And also we start to look at where they've come from. How have you modeled those? Where have they been sat in your life? Where did you get them from? So we look at the seeds, if you like, of what's been going on in their lives. And then we also ask them, which is a huge thing, is to surrender it.
Yeah. That's actually really difficult. And I know it sounds ignorant, but it's probably the most difficult. There's a few things where you have to surrender some of your problems over to God, and so many people surrender it and then they go and pick it back up again. Do you know what I mean? And there's 3 different courses in there. There's different sessions that you do it multiple times, and then there's one time where you have to do it with somebody, and that the person is there not to condemn you but to support you and to come alongside you. But most people are like, oh, I got to admit this in front of somebody. It's like, yeah, because this is a time when you really let it go, and they're going to help you let it go.
I always liken it to the Rubik cube. You know the Rubik's cubes that we used to have? Yeah,
Long before my time.
I'm sure it's not. Well, it's a bit like if we've got the problem and we can't solve the Rubik's cube, then and we hand it to God. We hand that Rubik's cube to God and we sit and we wait for God to sort it out. It's a bit like we surrender it to God. And then we have to sit back and we have to identify with ourselves. But we get so impatient waiting for God to sort it out for us that we grab the Rubik's cube back and we mix it all up again and we try and sort it out ourselves. And then before we know it, we've messed up. And then we keep giving the Rubik's cube back to God. And this is what happens within our emotional state, that we screw things up and then we give it to God. And then we snatch it back off God again. And we try and sort it out ourselves because it's not quick enough. And so we go through that process of learning to let go and surrender, that we don't have to keep picking that back up again. And we teach that process. It's not a quick fix, as people will realize, that it is learning to sit with yourself. And then we go on to toxic thoughts. So we learn about toxic thoughts, what they are, how they affect us in life, and how they play out in our lives.
How they're also kind of learned. So like, if I believe that women are inferior, I will teach my children that women are inferior. So they will then believe that women are inferior. So they will, go to girls and stuff like that and go, oh, you're inferior. Not the truth. Women are not inferior, but they learned it from me. And it was my toxic thought that then infected them.
Yeah, so it's about destructive behavior patterns as well. And so we sort of see them through that. And then we go on to a really nice one, which is who we are in Christ, and how we have one called the armor, the full armor of God.
That's fun. I love that one.
And so we take them and equip them, and what that actually means. What does that look like?
We actually, the way the Elijah Project works, it's interactive. It's a bit of fun. It goes back and forth. It's not just lecture or preaching. It's interactive. So like with the armor of God, imagine a little old mama sitting in the church, who wouldn't say boo to a goose. Put her inside the armor.
We get her full Roman armor.
Yeah,
we have it.
everything. So you put her into it, okay? And then you get people to throw little bean bags at her, okay? What I do is I get a rubber ball, so a much harder rubber ball, and I make sure that everybody knows that they're throwing these little bean bags because most people are nice and they go, oh, here you go. You know what I mean? Whereas I take the rubber ball and I say, Satan don't take no prisoners. And I used to play baseball. So I throw it like I did as baseball. I throw it full force at little old lady, right? And straight away, her shield comes up, hits her face, and the ball goes bouncing. More often than not, we're going to break something. Oh, well, it's a learning process. But it also shows that all you have to do is raise your faith. And you can teach so much on the armor of God. And it's a bit of fun for everybody because they can see the, little old lady just deflecting all the bean bags and everything coming at them, and it's really about showing how really you are protected in the armor of God.
Yeah. So we go through that whole process. So we have the helmet of salvation, and they actually put all this full armor on with the sword and everything else.
Good for pictures.
And it's great. It's great. It's great for people to actually feel how protected that they can be in God. And then we go through a process of forgiveness and wholeness, which maybe people want to go into need deliverance. And we deal with generational issues as well, which may be a problem, and a lot of prayer and ministry.
Yep.
That's about the Elijah Project.
We long-winded.
So essentially, the way I understand it is that the Elijah Project is for somebody who has an addiction, who is going through recovery, and then the Barnabas training is for, say, church leaders and stuff to be able to help take in people who have addiction. Am I correct?
Yeah. The Elijah Project is not just for people with addiction; it's for people with mental health issues too,
and just normal, long-standing Christians
Yeah.
who need just a little kick up the backside. It's not. Don't think that, like, what I've been a Christian so long, I know the Bible. I can quote it from beginning to end, and sometimes you need a little wake-up call to kind of go.
And sometimes
look at it
people are
different.
just stuck in their journey. They're not having that growth that they want to, and developing that deeper relationship with Christ. And sometimes they need something. There might be something sat in there from their past that's stopping them. Or there might be something hanging them up, and it's a good way to just filter through everything and say, well, okay, what's going on? Let's be real with myself again. So that programs, we train people to put that in their churches, and then Barnabas works alongside that with equipping people to come alongside people with particular health issues.
More than anything, it's more the marginalized, but in a way, it's about recognizing how to come alongside somebody. And there's multiple ways you can come alongside somebody, and you choose what you can handle. If you can handle rules and regulations and everything in order, then mentors for you. If you want some rules, but you don't really want to hold to them that well, you want to be a befriender. If you don't want any rules whatsoever and just do whatever you feel is right and God leads you, just want to be a friend. And it's about identifying people, and they figure it out themselves. When they go through the course, they figure out, well, I'm really going to be good at whatever. And then we teach them what that entails, what they need to do.
Also equipping them what to look for.
Yeah.
How to come alongside those that may be aggressive, or those that are insecure. And how to just approach these people, and
recognizing the rights and wrongs, and also keeping themselves safe and the other person safe.
Yeah.
So it's more identifying risks within the environment and being aware of your surroundings, so that somebody doesn't feel trapped. And then if they feel trapped and they have no choice, and then they're upset, then there's going to be a problem. So it's about avoiding those situations.
We have a lot of safeguarding protocol put in place as well, and how to identify those that are likely to reoffend if you've got reoffenders, and sexual offenders. So we've got the forms for those. And if you want to talk about those,
they're really simple forms. It's basically, if you have a sex offender, it's a lot of yeses and nos and a couple numbers. You count everything up, and then it gives you a score. And then you decide the risk. And then hopefully the church will have a safety person or a protocol person, somebody that will be able to identify the risks. And I mean, a simple way we had a pedophile that came into church, and I would always sit near the pedophile, not necessarily next to him, but I was always within an arm's reach, whatever that person was. If they got up and walked somewhere, I got up and walked with them. If they put themselves into an awkward position with a younger girl, I'd go up to the younger girl and say, hey, real quick, my wife just wanted to show you something. And I'd grab the little girl and I'd take her somewhere. The girl had no idea that there was a pedophile there. And the pedophile didn't feel pushed out, because I didn't make a big fuss about, whoa, you're not allowed to be around little girls. It's just that kind of thing.
But also, they're aware that the assessment's put in place as well.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of safety that goes on with this as well to support the church. So the church feels safe as well.
Yeah.
But
no matter what you get in, you got something that can handle it.
Yeah. These people should not be excluded because, maybe they've messed up, and they've got these issues, they've got these problems. They should not be excluded from the church. The church should be there to support them and put those protocols in place to protect them as well as protecting the rest within the church.
Yeah.
So I have two questions in one here. So let's say someone is interested in doing either the Barnabas training or going through the Elijah project. at the end, do they get a certificate? And then the other question, though, which is not related, is, as you talked about before, people who have addictions sometimes will have to steal to support that addiction, right? And so they steal from family, they steal from anybody. What would you say? Let's say somebody who has an addiction and has stolen and has to go to jail. Sometimes the family may feel, oh, we don't want to put him through that, right? And then some other people would think, well, he has to learn his lesson by going to jail. Kind of, how do you advise on this type of scenario? Like, if you are dealing with a person like that, or a family, or a church.
Okay, I'll start very simply with certificates. Yes, if you do an Elijah Project, we certificate everybody that's gone through the Elijah Project. Okay. The other thing is there's a whole pattern of training that you can do. So you can teach the Elijah Project, and when you get to a certain point, you can then be a person that oversees a bunch of Elijah Projects that are running. So there's a whole series of stuff that goes on, and there's certificated levels that you can go with each one, and there's a criterion. But when people talk to us about it, we can tell them, look, this is how long it takes. This is what you need to do. It's not something that you'll do instantly. It takes a couple of years. But once you get to that level and you got other people underneath you, simply put, you're just overseeing, and it's more apostolic that way.
We also make sure that if anybody, like the guys in Nigeria and Ghana, that when they've taken the program, that we oversee them, that they're never left to run the programs alone. Until they are confident, and we're confident with them that they're secure in what they're doing. We don't ever want them to just pick up a project and just sort of go, oh yeah, I know what to do with that. But actually they don't. So it's really important for them as well, because they need to be secure in what they're doing.
Yeah. And in another way of looking at it, we tend to get a group together. Everybody that's been a teacher teaching the Elijah Project, whenever somebody learns how to teach the Elijah Project, they teach back to the teachers. So in a way, there's that. And then I also have a WhatsApp group where all the teachers are there. If anyone ever has any questions, they can ask whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's more about, there's a lot of people there. So it's not like I'm alone, I'm doing it by myself. They have other people just besides us. They have other people that are actually teaching that they can draw from.
Yeah, because not only are they supporting the people to come through their issues and problems, but they need support as well. So it's making sure that the whole thing is a support network. But going on to that second question you asked about if somebody had to go to prison for their stealing.
I would start with the Bible. It says you're not allowed to steal. Straight away, the Bible says it's wrong, and the law says it's wrong. Okay? We understand that they are stealing because they need to feed something that's probably out of their control. Understandable, but it's still wrong.
And we have to look at why.
Yeah.
The big question is why. And I love using that, and people don't like me using it because why do you always ask why? Because there's always a reason. Yeah. There's always a reason why that person's stealing.
Yeah.
And you also get families that don't want them to go there. They don't want them to go into prison. So they start enabling. And when they start enabling this, the person to stay out of prison, this is where it becomes a problem.
Yeah, because then they're going to go, okay, I don't have to go to prison because my family will keep me out. They'll keep me doing whatever I need to do, and they'll save me again and again and again. But some people need that brick wall. They got to hit it. You can't pad that wall for the rest of their lives, because if you die, you're not going to be there to pad them anymore, and then they're going to crash even harder.
Yeah, it's a big thing. People don't realize they enable people. by giving them money so they can pay their bills, but actually they're not paying their bills. They're
doing it for the drugs.
Or they want to go and buy the latest game or something, you know. And it's so damaging actually to enable your loved one. And how we go in denial as well about enabling. We're like, oh no, we're not. We're just loving them. We just want the best for them, you know. But actually, it's actually taking the process double the amount of time for them to get better, because they're actually prolonging this for them. And it's hard to stop enabling because you don't want to see your loved one hurt.
You don't want them hurt. You want to help them.
Yeah, but the kindest thing you can do is to stop and allow them to reach that rock bottom quickly. The quicker they're down there, and the quicker they can then say, okay, now I need help.
Yeah.
Now I need help. But enabling someone is actually just prolonging. I hope that answers what you were.
Yes. So the other question is, so for someone, let's say, who has gone through a recovery process, right, who have fallen back into the same addiction, is it harder for them this time around compared to the first time?
Usually,
not really.
I mean, in a way, but usually if you fall back in, you tend to fall back in harder. So you always kind of, if you think of it like cocaine, if you had a habit of 1 line a day, when you fall back, you'll fall back to 1.5. You'll fall back to a 2. Okay. That's what usually, okay. I'll explain OD real simply. People know exactly how much they used to use. They come off, they get themselves clean. The body no longer can tolerate the level that they were at. They go back into the habit that they had, go back to exactly the level that they were going to do before. When they inject or they, snort or smoke, they smoke to the level they used to be at. The body can't tolerate it. And the body says, that's too much for me, and it shuts down. Okay, that's where ODs, and that's why sometimes addicts kill themselves, because they weren't doing it on purpose. They were just going back to what they were used to doing. Just the body wasn't tolerant enough to handle it. Okay, so in a way, if people do get themselves clean, they've got to remember when they go back, they're not going to be at the level they were before. And usually, if they go back, they're going to hit it harder. And it goes back to the same old issue. We need to know why you're going back. And we had many guys that fell, and we didn't say, oh, well, actually, we kind of did. But we didn't condemn them. We'd go, that was stupid, wasn't it? Now let's figure out why, so that next time you're going to be smarter, faster, quicker, and you won't go into that problem. And it's more that sort of support.
So, like Jesus said, when a demon is cast out of someone, if they don't occupy with something else, then they come back with even worse. They go and find some 7 more demons, and then come in, and then the state of the man is worse than it was before. So what are some things that someone who has gotten out of, who has recovered from an addiction, what are some things that they need to do to maintain their recovery? We just talked about, people going back, but what are things that someone who has recovered from addiction, what do they have to do to keep their recovery so they don't fall back?
I think priority is keeping it real, keeping themselves in the present, and keeping an eye on their behavior and their thoughts. If their thoughts are traveling off down the wrong way, they need to be able to grab hold of those quick and to put today's reality on it. And not to become overconfident, that actually I've got this sussed. Yeah, I'm free now. I can do this. You know, and you put yourself vulnerable, and you make yourself vulnerable then, and you set yourself up to fail. And it's knowing that. I was talking about that Bible verse today. What was it? Romans.
Hang on,
Romans 7, was it?
Yeah, do the things I shouldn't do.
Yeah, I do. I keep doing those things.
Oh, I turned everything off. So.
Yeah, I keep doing the things I shouldn't do. You'll have to remind me what that is, because I've turned my.
Yeah, we turned all our devices off trying to get rid of the echo. So.
Oh, and you're on mute.
And you're on mute, so
we can't hear you.
No, I was saying that was the scripture we had for service today.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll be rounding up shortly. I mean, we are past time, but we had the interruption, so I think we can have an extra 10 minutes, for this. But I mean, I think this is fascinating. You talked about Jim. You talked about the fact that when you're going to a place with prostitutes, you come with your wife, right? So you are protecting yourself in a certain way, and as Dawn was saying, don't be overconfident. That because some people would say, well, to show that I've overcome alcohol, I can go to the alcohol store and the liquor store and not feel anything. That shows that yes, I've overcome alcoholism, and I think that's a very key principle. As we wind up, do you want to kind of share your final thoughts, each of you, as we wind up?
I would say, like, feeding off the back of what you were saying, one thing that so many people at work dues, they go, we're having our Christmas work due, which is always a drinking one. And I always kind of blow it off and I say, no, I'm not that type of guy. I just don't want to do it, and realistically, what I probably should have said, and I probably should say, it's just something I don't, was I used to be alcoholic. And if I go to this, that's going to be too much of a temptation. And I can't have that. Sometimes I feel that people won't respect what I say. And they'll be, oh, you'll be fine. We'll make sure you have orange juice. You know what I mean? But they don't grasp the concept of the real temptation is there. And realistically, if you get yourself clean, like Dawn said, it's about being real. I don't put myself in an awkward position. I don't risk what could happen. Yes, I drink beer. No, I don't. A 4-pack takes me a month or two to go through, something like that. For an alcoholic to have beer in the house and take a month or two to get through, that's a 4-pack. You know what I mean? That's huge. But I don't rely on the temptation. I don't go for it. I don't put myself, like we said before, I don't put myself in a position where I'm alone with a girl who's a prostitute. It won't happen. I will always make sure that there are boundaries. And a lot of people that have addictions don't have the boundaries, or they do have a boundary, but it's blurred. And it's about having established, well-documented, serious boundaries that you put up and don't break them, because that is what's going to help keep you on the straight and narrow.
Okay, and for me, I think I'd just like to remind people of the Rubik's Cube. That we make a mess of things ourselves when we're left alone to deal with it. And when we hand that Rubik's Cube to God, he can make things so much better than what we can. But don't snatch it back. Don't snatch that cube back. Allow him the time it takes for him to make it better for us. Don't think you can do it in your own strength.
Thank you so much. I think this has been a wonderful 2 weeks dealing with the topic of addiction. I think this is something that, a lot of people don't really know how to handle, because we are not really taught, about this. And a lot of times, churches find themselves in a position where someone shows up and, they don't know what to do. There's this feeling of, sometimes a feeling of guilt, or sometimes thinking that, oh, only prayer will solve, will break addiction. Whereas, as we've talked about, there are so many layers to getting over addiction, that prayer is important. I mean, I'm not saying prayer is not important, but in addition to the prayer, there are things that the people need to do. They need to take responsibility, for themselves. They need to, or we need to make sure that, they safeguard themselves from, the situations that get them, to get back to that behavior. And then again, the whys, dealing with the whys, as we've learned over the last 2 weeks, that for every answer there's another why, to get to the root of the problem. And so we can pray for people, and if we don't add all the things that help people to recover fully, then that does not help. And one other important thing that Jim mentioned is, we have to be realistic, when we are helping people with addiction, that we're not going to have 100%. And so even if we have 1 out of 10, it's the one. And so these are important principles and concepts that I believe will be helpful. And for those who are watching who say, oh, I have no training in this area, we talked about their website is Recovered for Life. So recovered, the number 4 life.org. And they have, resources, training resources that you can access to help you and your church, to be able to help individuals who are battling addiction. So we want to thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Don and Jim, for spending your 2 weekends to educate us on this. God bless you so much.
You're
You're
welcome.
welcome.
God bless
God
you.
bless you.
Hello, Dr. Jonah.